Welcome to Reach the World ASAP. My name is Pastor Scott Griswold. This is my wife, Julie, and we have a story to tell. We are standing on the property that the Lord has led us to for the Reach the World Next Door Missionary Training Center. But how we got here is amazing. Back in January, right after GYC, we headed out looking all over the place for a place to set up home and to establish a place that we could reach out to the many thousands of unreached people in Houston, Texas. And we didn't know where to go. We searched all over around the edges of the metro area. There's 7 million people in this huge fourth largest city in America, and the most diverse, by the way. So as we looked, we just prayed and kept going, and finally we found the one we were sure was perfect. And that night it was snatched out of our hands. But there was another one, and so the next morning we went to look at that, only to have 2 or 3 weeks later have that one slammed in our faces right before we were headed out on the Southeast Asia mission trip for 6 weeks with ASAP Ministries. So that really threw me. I wanted Julie to be able to have a home that she could count on when we got back, because we would be moving in 2 weeks after coming back from the trip. And now there was just no way that was going to happen. We weren't, and you weren't feeling too good about this either.
Yes, there's a verse that says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding." And that was truly what we were doing, is continuing to just focus on the mission in Southeast Asia and just trust that God had a place for us. He said in the Acts of the Apostles that just as surely as there's a mansion in heaven, there's a place on earth for you. And so I kept claiming that promise, and we came back, and I was busy packing our home and getting ready, not knowing where we were going to land, but we knew we were driving to Texas.
Do you feel a little bit like Abraham and Sarah?
Yes, when God told Abraham in Genesis 12:1, to get out of the country, away from your family and your father's house, and I will show you a land. I kept claiming that promise, and truly he did show us a land. Can I keep going?
Sure.
A week before we were leaving, we were in bed. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and the phone rang, and there was a big booming voice that said, "Hi, Scott. I'm Jim Christensen, and I'm going to be looking for property for you." We thought, okay, thank you. Who are you, and how did you hear about it? And he had happened to be, after he hadn't been in church for a long time, and when he went to this specific church, it was Dan Cearns was there and happened to talk with him about the need for Reach the World Training Center for us.
Dan is my supervisor here in Texas. This is a partnership, this training center between the Texas Conference and ASAP Ministries.
And so he said, well, I'm looking for my daughter, a place for her family, and I'll just keep my eye out. So the next morning he looked at 2 camps. One was $3 million, and the other was this Healing Hands Ranch is what it was called. It was for the homeless. It was a ministry to the homeless.
So we went online to look at this place that Jim had found. And there we could not believe it was 26 acres of beautiful countryside, not far from Houston, 7 structures. There are 5 cabins, 2 houses. Then there's a big, huge wood shop, just beautiful, with all kinds of places for vocational training, and another auto mechanic shop, big and ready to be used. Lumber, there's even a spot in the woods that has a chapel right there with 3 crosses. Gorgeous place that had been used for Healing Hands ministry. It was helping the homeless get back reintegrated into society and work. So we wanted to just jump in the plane and come. But we needed to say goodbyes. We had to finish packing, and we had to drive down. So we just hoped and prayed that it would stay. Well, as we got here on a Thursday night. It was too late to come. But immediately the next morning we were here, and we met the owner.
And then he took us on a tour, a 4-hour tour that started with prayer and ended with prayer, talked about ministry, how he had used the property and how we wanted to use the property. And you could tell that he was very pleased. He was looking, his prayer was to find someone who would also continue God's work on this property.
At the close of the tour, I'm thinking about the money. He had listed it at $470,000. That's a lot of money, but not for this. I mean, things down in the city, one little spot in a small little backyard can be that. But here was all this for that amount, but we didn't have that total. We had made an offer of $400,000, and that was as high as we could go. He said, well, I can come down maybe at $10,000 or so, but that's it. So what do? We were hoping he would just drop to the bottom. He said, well, you know what? I think there's room for God to move. Well, we were having a hard time moving into the Sabbath to rest about it. We kept trying to think, what can we do? Where can we come up with the money? And then we decided, okay, we just have to rest it in God's hands. We went down to the camp meeting, a big, huge camp meeting of about 8,000 Seventh-day Adventists coming together in Houston, and just prayed. I had a 5-minute time to share from up front, but I certainly wasn't there to fundraise. But a couple came up to us that we had met only one time before. They wanted to eat lunch with us. And over lunch, they asked us about our project. Took real interest in just asking all kinds of questions until they realized we were looking and praying for more money to finish out this project. At that moment, they said, we want to help. Well, we didn't know what that meant, but we invited them up to come and take a look. And after they had a full tour and heard how God was moving, they turned to us and said, we need to tell you our story. When we were overseas off and on for the last 3 years, we weren't sure about our taxes. So this year, as the tax return looked like we might even have to pay some, we prayed and said, Lord, whatever you give to us, that's what we'll give to you. They thought maybe 700 might come back. Instead, he told me it was 34,000. My eyes got so big. That was the exact amount that I felt we should offer, but I didn't know where it was going to come from. He got out his checkbook, they wrote the check, handed it to us, and we ran down to tell the owner what God was doing.
And to show him. As
we shared with him, he just looked at us and he smiled and he said, I was just watching to see if God was in this. And then he put out his hand and he said, if you can come up 6,000 more to 440, we have a deal. I shook his hand and we couldn't believe it. And then he turned to us and said, I don't see why you can't just move in today. So we moved in on the next day, on my birthday, into God's miracle. This place is going to be used in a mighty way to reach out to refugees, immigrants, and international students in Houston. It really helped, didn't it, Julie, when you're leaving family and good church family and everything, and us being in the office with ASAP Ministries. We miss them all. Yes, our children are still up there at Andrews University, and we miss them a lot. But knowing we're in the center of God's will helps in a huge way. I think there was a quote that you wanted to share that is powerful to remind all of us, if God calls you to do something, don't be afraid, don't look back, just press forward.
This is what we want Jesus to say about Reach the World Next Door Training Center. He made full provision for the prosecution of their work and took upon himself the responsibility of its success. So long as they obeyed his word and worked in connection with him, they could not fail.
That's from Acts of the Apostles, page 29. Powerful what God can do when we step out in faith and trust him. We did not feel very strong in our faith at all, but that little mustard seed he takes and works with. So how can you partner with us? First, there is a real need for finances. We need money for operating expenses to help the evangelism to go forward in the city. Secondly, we very much need prayers that God will raise up laborers and reach the Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, and secular people in the Houston area. And thirdly, we especially want you to pray for God to raise up the students to come and join us here on this special mission to reach the unreached in Houston and train for mission work overseas. They'll be learning agriculture, vocational skills, cross-cultural ministry, all kinds of things, medical ministry as well. And we are looking forward to what God is going to do. If you would like to come join us, go to reachtheworldnextdoor.com, find the place that speaks about training, and apply. If you know young people that should know about this, forward this message to them and encourage them to come and check it out. We don't know what all God has in store, but we know it's something mighty. As Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call to me, and I will show you great and mighty things which you have not seen." May God bless you as together we reach the world ASAP.